What made you lose respect for someone? I already had barely any respect for my mum because she cheated on my lovely father 2 times. Then last month she tells me the truth about what she did in the USA. 8 guys 2 women. My neighbor was saying how retarded the delivery people were when they left packages in the mailroom unsorted and all over the place. I admit it's super annoying, but that doesn't warrant using that word. Any respect I had for him went down the drain. To catch them in a lie. Excessive complaining, especially over situations they've decided to put themselves in. Anyone who voted for Trump twice. Once was bad enough, but twice? At supporting him now. And went down the queue hole. Just a big nope from me. Edit to add, anti-mask and or anti-vax. Nope nope nope. My parents didn't protect my sister when my uncle tried to harass her. Dishonest people, not lies. I don't mind lying. But if a person's life purpose is X, be honest about it and be open about it. I.e., being a workaholic but telling your partner you are not. My boss has done a lot to continually drain what little respect I have for her, including spouting her insane anti-vax nonsense, but there is one instance that really sealed it for me. I previously worked as an evening supervisor and occasionally took on the role again in the daytime when my boss wasn't around to assist. A colleague had been looking for our boss for a good 5 minutes when she asked me to speak to a customer regarding a policy, and I confirmed the policy for the irate customer. I gave her my boss's card and said she's welcome to speak to her when she returns. The woman calls my boss right then and there, and my boss picks up, even though 2 minutes ago she wasn't in her office. My boss comes out, contradicts everything we'd already discussed with the customer and tells the customer that we are poorly educated and she'll make sure we don't mess up again. My colleague and I stood there slack-jawed as our boss explained the policy was never what we were taught it was, and she had no idea where we got such an idea. If this shithole didn't pay so well, I'd have left a long time ago. Unamused face. A childhood friend called up after years we were raised in a third world country, asking if I could buy and ship an oxygen concentrator. The thing costs north of $900. I knew his parents well, and from the conversation, it looked like it was a tough time for his family with COVID and all. I was about to place an order and not ask him money for it. Checked up with my mutual friend and got to know he had just started a new business of selling oxygen concentrators at ridiculous prices due to the demand. I was admiring a plant at school that hadn't been abused by students, and I mentioned it to my friends. One of them looked me dead in the eye and started destroying the plant. I was pretty disappointed. Person I used to work with told me they wanted to go to Thailand to have sex with a 13-year-old. My boss fixed pool tables, and liked to claim he was the best at what he did. Then proceeded to tell me about his glory days doing the job, wasted, driving all over the state from bar to bar until a doc told him his liver was shot. He no longer drinks, but Jesus Christ. On top of that, being the best at something probably means showing up on time, knowing where you're going, having your tools, having a working vehicle. The dude was a mess. I stayed at that job until he asked me to drive hours out of my way to do a job for less than if I stayed at home. When I called him out, he called me arrogant, entitled, and ignorant. Scorch the earth, why don't you? I worked part-time as an air talent at a radio station. My friend was the program director. I was working on a Friday night. My friend came in. We sat down. He said, "We have nothing more for you." This was not unexpected. Station ownership just changed hands, whatever. I gave him my key, shook hands, and parted as friends. The very next morning, less than 12 hours later, he called me and wanted to know if I could do live broadcast for him because he was still drunk. LOL, no. Haven't talked to him since. There was a good professor. He knew what he taught. But he expected everyone to shave and began imposing weird restrictions on shirt patterns. Didn't address a single girl. Anyone who hadn't shaved that day or wore a shirt he didn't like had to go to the bathroom, borrow razors/shirts and come back. Being the only teacher who could teach in a staff of 200 would normally be something to respect, but his antics were too disgusting. Permanent respect debuff can never rise above 0. My great-aunt repeatedly stole money from my dying Vietnam vet grandfather for years and years, and no one knew. She was the designated representative of the estate because he wasn't mentally able to due to his traumas. She barely gave him enough money to get food and never visited him. He died 2 years ago, and the whole family except for her and her husband went to the funeral. Even people we hadn't seen for decades showed up to pay their respects. One day after we had flown back home, still absorbing the information and processing the grief and sadness, she calls my dad and asks how much money she's gonna get for taking care of him. At this point we don't know anything about her stealing the money from his account. We were shocked. My dad was taken aback. He didn't even know what to say except that he needed time to grieve. She kept harassing him about the money. Mind you, she has 2 houses, several cars, and lives luxuriously, while we were all jammed into our tiny house sharing a beta car that was about to explode. But it wasn't about the money. It was about the fact that she was so aggressive about it. Fast forward, my dad is sorting through my grandpa's estate and he's finding all these random gaps and charges for random things. One for an expensive tractor that my grandpa doesn't own and wouldn't have bought. Turns out sweet Linda was stealing money, a few thousand here and there, and buying herself and her family a ton of stuff while ignoring my grandpa and leaving him to take care of himself. If it wasn't for my dad flying out to his house and the neighbors, he would have died a lot sooner. She didn't care about him at all. My dad confronted her and she said the nastiest things about our family. The mask came off and she showed her true colors. She never cared about any of us. And now she has the audacity to try and legally take all of the estate that she has no legal ground to take. That's the day I lost an aunt. And respect for her altogether. I had a co-worker friend that I was really close with. She begins looking for a new job and just stops working her old job. It's government work, so while it was noticed, not much was ever done. She quit doing any work for this organization a year before she put in her notice. Immediately turned me off from being friends with her moving forward. I have a friend who treats me like shit and belittles me, but typically only when we're in front of a certain other group of friends that we have. When it's just us, he usually doesn't do it. He just likes to put me down when other people can see. Two-faced. It took me a long time, years, to finally notice this pattern, but now that I do, it's so consistent and undeniable, and it's very disappointing. One of my best friends too. My best friend of I think over a decade used to be really funny. He was goofy, weird and all around wholesome. Until about a year ago he changed into a dickhead. He started becoming a smartass and thinking everyone was less than him. At which point he started losing friends, lots of them. He lost 6 or more friends in a month, including me, and he probably thinks we stopped hanging out with him because he was too smart. I wish I could hang out with him and have fun, but he's just so rude. Just as a side note, it's kinda creepy and weird. I was walking around with my friend recently and we passed by my ex-best friend's house. His house has 7 windows. 2 on the first floor and 5 on the second floor. All facing the street I was walking past. Now the windows on the bottom were either small or facing a different place. So we pass his house and a few seconds later we hear thump 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 and he's bolting at us. And even though it's been about a week, I'm still confused on how TF he saw us, had enough time to put on socks and shoes and run towards us without us already being gone. Accusing me of gaslighting him and refusing to talk to me about what upset him really didn't do him any favors. 2 things. 1, my parents being transphobic, homophobic, and abusive to me, their trans lesbian child. 2 managers, mother and daughter, at a restaurant I worked for. They bought the restaurant from the mom's dad who owned it for 35 years. Immediately, the quality of food and staff morale plummeted. We used to have almost everything fresh, Only thing frozen was the ice cream and a container of a sauce that was only available on one lunch of the week in case we needed more. A couple months after they took over, there's nothing fresh in the restaurant anymore. You couldn't pay me to eat there now. As I was gearing up to leave, they were blatant assholes to employees. The mom co-owner has a husband who would be in the front room every night drinking and harassing people who just want to be left alone to eat. The owners drive a Mercedes and a Maserati, have an 85% profit margin, and always say there's no money to give raises. I worked 3 years without getting any raise. Employee turnover averages about a month as said by the people I keep in touch with.